Greetings and warm welcome to all my dear learners who have joined with me to understand section 54 under income from capital gains better. This is Dr. Lynette Cristilda, Professor in Commerce, Women's Christian College, Chennai. I hope you have watched my previous video on Introduction to Income from Capital Gains. If not, I encourage you to watch it before listening to this topic. You can find the YouTube link for the same in the description box. Now we shall learn the provisions of section 54 in detail. Section 54 deals with capital gains that arises on transfer of long-term residential house property, which will henceforth be called the original asset. This section not only includes HP but also to the land that is apure tenant thereto. This section can be claimed by individual or HUF. The capital gain that arises out of the transfer of the original asset must be reinvested in another residential house property within 1 year before or 2 years before, 2 years after the sale of the original asset, or a new house property can be constructed for residential purpose within 3 years after the sale of the original asset, or it can be deposited into the CGDS, which is Capital Gains Deposit Scheme, before the date of filing of return of income under section 139. When the capital gains is reinvested, then the exemption under section 54 can be claimed, which is the amount reinvested or the long-term capital gain, whichever is less. In case the original asset is compulsorily acquired by the government, then the time limit for reinvestment shall apply from the date of receipt of compensation. After the amount is deposited into the CGDS, the amount should be utilized to purchase or construct a residential house property within 2 years or 3 years from the date of transfer of original asset. That is, in case of purchase it is 2 years, and in case of construction it is 3 years. The unutilized amount from the CGDS can be withdrawn only after the expiry of 3 years from the date of transfer of the original asset, and it becomes long-term capital gain in that particular previous year. If the newly acquired house property is sold within 3 years, then the exemption earlier claimed, that is in respect of the original asset, and the capital gain arising on transfer of the new house property shall become short-term capital gain in the previous year in which the new house property is sold. Mr. Raj sold a residential house property in our previous year, which is 1920, for 12 lakhs and 10,000. This asset, he had bought it in 2001 for rupees 2 lakhs. He also paid a brokerage of 10,000 and he deposits 5 lakhs into CGDS. Now we are to find his taxable capital gains. With the information on the date of purchase and date of sale, we can understand that this residential house property is a long-term asset and Mr. Raj is an individual, and hence we can claim section 54 because he is selling a residential house property and depositing the money into CGDS. According to the previous slides, we have learned that Section 54 can be claimed when the capital gains is reinvested in another residential house property or when it is deposited into CGDS. That is why here in this case, the amount that he has deposited into the CGDS can be claimed under Section 54. Now, we shall see how the solution is computed. The format, as we saw in our previous video, for long-term capital gain, sales consideration minus brokerage will give you the net sales consideration. Since this is a long-term capital asset, the cost of acquisition needs to be indexed. Now, how will you index the cost of acquisition? Cost of acquisition into the year of the CII for the year of sale divided by the CII for the year of purchase. So here the inflation index for the year 1920 is 289 and the CII for the year 2001 to 2 is 100. When you apply the formula, the indexed cost of acquisition comes to 5,78,000, which will give you a long-term capital gain of 6,22,000. Now, after this, you need to find out the exemption under Section 54. Since all the conditions that we have seen in the previous slide are satisfied, Mr. Raj can claim exemption under Section 54, which is long-term capital gain or the amount reinvested plus the amount deposited in the CGDS, whichever is less. So in this case, the long-term capital gain is 6,22,000 and there is no amount reinvested because he has not yet bought any house, but he has deposited 5 lakh rupees into the CGDS, which is the capital gain deposit scheme. So you find whichever is less and that becomes his exemption, finally giving him a taxable long-term capital gain of 1,22,000. Now, as an extension to the same illustration, let's assume that this first case occurs. That is, he buys a new house property on 30/10/2020 for 5 lakhs withdrawing from the CGDS. So what we have studied in the provision, the amount which is deposited in the CGDS should be withdrawn and a new house should be purchased or constructed within 2 years or 3 years from the date of sale of the original asset. So in that case, we see within 1 year from the date of sale of the original asset, Mr. Raj buys a new house withdrawing from the CGDS for 5 lakhs. And so his capital gain should be calculated like this. So the amount deposited is 5 lakhs and the amount utilized is also 5 lakhs. So there is no capital gains which is taxable for him. And this is happening in the previous year 2021 because the date of purchase of new house is on 30/10/2020. So this comes into the previous year 2021. Same way, case 2. If Mr. Raj sells this new house which he has bought on 30/10/2020, he is selling that house immediately after 1 year and he sells it for 6 lakhs. Now, what will be his taxable capital gain? Remember, in the provision we have already studied when the new asset is sold within 3 years, then the exemption earlier claim becomes taxable along with the capital gains that arises on transfer of that new asset. Same thing is applied in this question. So the sales consideration for the new house is 6 lakhs and the exemption earlier claimed is taken back. So how do we take back the exemption earlier claimed? You reduce it from the cost of acquisition. Now what is the cost of acquisition? See, in case 1 we know that he buys the house for 5 lakhs. So the cost of that new house is 5 lakhs. So here in case 2 you have to bring in that cost of acquisition. So 5 lakhs minus the exemption earlier claimed. So if you go to the previous slide, we can find that the exemption under section 54 which Mr. Raj had claimed depositing in CGDS, that amount was the exemption. That amount needs to be taken back. Now how will you take it back? You take it back from the cost of acquisition. And so 5 lakhs minus 5 lakhs. So nil will be reduced here, giving totally short-term capital gain which is taxable will be 6 lakhs. I hope you understand this slide. Hence, to conclude, you have learnt the provisions of section 54 and its application in problems. I hope and believe this video would be of greater help to you in solving any problem under income from capital gain. Thank you.